Everybody's seen the headlines by now. Vinicius Jr is staying at Real Madrid. Within minutes, Arsenal fans were getting laughed at, rival fans were celebrating, and the conversation suddenly became, "See, we told you, Arsenal never had the chance." But here's the thing, when you actually read between the lines, nothing has really changed. Because Sky Sports didn't report that Vinicius has signed. They didn't report that he's agreed a new contract. They didn't even report that negotiations have reached a breakthrough. Instead, they said something very different. Real Madrid have no intention of selling, which we kind of already knew. Confidence isn't a signature. Belief is an agreement. And buried further down the report is one sentence that changes the entire conversation. Arsenal are monitoring his situation closely with a year remaining on his current deal. Now ask yourself something. If this story was completely finished, if Vinicius had already committed his future, why even include Arsenal? Why mention they're still watching? Because despite the optimism coming from Madrid, there's still something unresolved. And that unresolved issue is Vinicius Jr himself. This is where people forget something about football transfers. The club doesn't ultimately decide. The player does. Real Madrid can refuse bids all day long. They can tell journalists they ain't selling. They can brief the media that they're relaxed. None of that matters. If the player refuses to extend, because once the contract starts running down, the balance of power slowly begins to shift. Go back just a few days. David Ornstein broke one of the biggest transfer stories of the summer.
David Ornstein, Arsenal are exploring a move to sign Vinicius Jr from Real Madrid.
He revealed Arsenal were exploring a move for Vinicius Jr. Not negotiating, not bidding, exploring. An idea approved internally. It said much rest on the contract process. And that wasn't a throwaway line, it was the entire story. Remember, Ornstein doesn't just report on anything, he's usually accurate when it comes to his reports. Arsenal's hopes were never built around convincing Madrid. They were built around waiting to see what happens, whether Vinicius and Madrid could actually reach an agreement. And judging by what's happened since, the agreement still hasn't happened, which means the door isn't necessarily closed. It might not be wide open yet, but it certainly hasn't been slammed shut either. Now, of course, Real Madrid remain favourites. Nobody is denying that. Mourinho and Vinicius Jr, their relationship is also still unclear. We know they are one of the biggest clubs on earth. Vinicius has won almost everything there. He's adored by many of the fans. And if a fair agreement is reached, this conversation probably ends. But football transfers aren't decided by reputation. They're decided by contracts. And contracts are decided by negotiations. And that's where this story becomes fascinating, because reports coming from Spain suggest this isn't simply about wages. It's not just about the money, it's about the control. When people hear contract negotiations, they instantly think one thing: money. One of the major talking points surrounding these negotiations has been image rights and commercial income. Now, for most footballers, image rights are simply part of the contract. But Vinicius isn't most footballers. He's one of the biggest athletes on the planet. Every advertisement, every campaign, every sponsorship deal, every social media partnership generates huge amounts of money. So naturally, he wants a larger share of what he's creating. Reports have suggested that one of the sticking points is how much control the financial benefit Vinicius should receive from his own commercial value. That isn't unusual at this level. Elite footballers regularly negotiate over image rights because those rights can be worth tens of millions over the length of a contract. And if that's one of the key discussions, then suddenly this isn't simply the case of, oh, Real Madrid have offered him a contract. It's about whether both sides agree on what that contract actually looks like. Now think about Arsenal's position. They don't need Real Madrid to suddenly decide they want to sell. They simply need negotiations to drag on, and that's it. Every week without an agreement creates uncertainty. Every month without a signature keeps Arsenal's interest. Because once a player enters the final stages of his contract without renewing, clubs start paying attention. That's exactly what David Ornstein hinted at. He dropped clues. Arsenal's interest depends almost entirely on how these negotiations unfold, not on making a 250 million bid tomorrow. There's another interesting layer that doesn't get talked about enough: power. For years, Real Madrid have held all of it, but contracts change that way. If Vinicius doesn't sign, Madrid eventually have a choice to make. Again, that doesn't mean they suddenly want to sell. Far from it. Everything coming out of Madrid suggests they expect him to stay. But expectation and certainty aren't the same thing. Then there's something else that Arsenal fans have quietly noticed. According to reports circulating from Spain, there has still been no final meeting that has produced an agreement. One report even suggests that if Vinicius ultimately decides he wants a different role or a project where he feels even more central, Arsenal could become a genuine option. Not because Arsenal are bigger than Madrid, nobody is arguing that, but because every elite player values different things. Some chase trophies, some chase legacy, some chase influence, some chase financial freedom. Only Vinicius knows what matters most to him. There's also an Arsenal connection that keeps resurfacing. Paulo Xavier, a scout now working with Arsenal who previously worked with the Brazilian football system and has long-standing knowledge of Vinicius' development. It doesn't guarantee a transfer, but football is built on relationships. Clubs value people who understand players, understand their families, understand their personalities, and understand what motivates them. Sometimes those connections matter more than fans realise. So while rival fans are treating the Sky Sports update like it's a final chapter, it might actually just be another chapter in an ongoing negotiation. Because until Vinicius signs the contract, the biggest question remains uncertain. Will he? Why Arsenal believe they still have a chance. Now let's flip this around. Forget Real Madrid for a second. Why would Arsenal even entertain an idea that most people immediately dismiss? Clubs don't spend time exploring impossible transfers. David Ornstein's wording was incredibly important. He didn't say Arsenal had made an offer. He didn't say negotiations had started. He said Arsenal were exploring the possibility. And usually when Ornstein says exploring the possibility, Arsenal usually get deals done. That means somewhere inside the club there was enough belief to investigate whether a deal could exist under the right circumstances. Elite clubs don't do that for clicks. They do it because someone believes there is at least a pathway. And this is where rival fans may be getting ahead of themselves. The reaction online has almost been as if Vinicius has already signed a new 5-year contract. Nothing official has been announced by Real Madrid. Nothing has been signed publicly. Instead, people are reacting to confidence. Confidence can be justified, but confidence can also disappear very quickly in football. How many times have we seen clubs brief journalists that they're relaxed, only for the situation to change weeks later? It happens in pretty much every transfer window. Negotiations don't move in straight lines. There's another reason Arsenal won't completely walk away. Timing. Football isn't just about who has the biggest name. It's about being ready when opportunities appear. Think about some of the biggest transfers over the last decade. Many of them looked impossible. A contract stalls, a relationship changes, a player's priorities evolve, and within a matter of weeks, a move that looked unrealistic becomes very real. Arsenal know that, which is why simply staying informed costs them nothing. Then you have to ask another uncomfortable question. What does Vinicius actually want over the next 5 years? Only he knows the answer. At Real Madrid, he's already won the biggest trophies, Champions League, league titles, individual recognition. And it looks like Real Madrid are going in a new direction. Real Madrid seem like they want new players. They have already signed Diomande. The president speaks of his love for Elise. We've heard rumblings of Mbappe wanting to play on the left. So if he's negotiating hard, it's reasonable to think he's looking beyond just another pay rise. Players at that level start thinking about legacy, influence, freedom, their commercial brand, their role inside a team, their importance within a project. If Vinicius feels Real Madrid can offer all of that, he'll probably stay. And then there's Mikel Arteta's project. Whatever you think of Arsenal, one thing is undeniable: top players increasingly respect what Arteta has built. A young squad, Champions League football, regular title challenges, one of the strongest defensive structures in Europe. That matters. And remember, they're now champions of the Premier League. Again, that doesn't mean Vinicius will choose Arsenal. It simply explains why Arsenal haven't completely moved on. So maybe the biggest mistake rival fans are making isn't believing he will stay. That's still the most likely outcome. The biggest mistake is believing the story is already over. Because until the contract is signed, every major club with the resources to dream will continue watching. If Real Madrid are so confident, why hasn't the signature been signed yet? Because while everyone is arguing over whether Arsenal can afford Vinicius or whether Real Madrid would ever sell, very few people are asking the one question that could decide everything. What happens if negotiations keep dragging on? That's the scenario Arsenal are quietly watching, because every transfer has a tipping point. Right now, Real Madrid appear calm. The messaging is consistent. We're confident. We're not selling. He'll stay. That's exactly what you'd expect a club in their position to say. That's the stance Mourinho will probably have too. But again, things between Mourinho and Vinny Jr weren't really great a few months back. Would this seep into the transfer? Would this impact Vinicius' decision? If weeks became months without an agreement, then the pressure starts to build. Not publicly at first, internally. Because every day that passes without a renewal slightly reduces Real Madrid's leverage. Remember, this isn't just any player. This is arguably one of the 3 or 4 most valuable footballers on the planet. You don't suddenly allow someone of that stature to drift towards the end of the contract without asking serious questions. Madrid know that. Arsenal know that. Every elite club knows that. That's why Arsenal don't need to panic. Patience could be their biggest weapon. There's another thing people overlook: the timing of Sky Sports' report. Read it carefully. It focuses entirely on Madrid's confidence. Confidence reflects one side of the negotiation. And negotiations are always two-sided. Until ink hits paper, football has a habit of surprising people. That's why, despite the Sky Sports update, Arsenal supporters haven't completely switched off, and shouldn't. And it's why rival fans might be celebrating just a little bit too early. And if negotiations continue without a signature, at what point do you think Arsenal should seriously test Real Madrid's resolve? Let me know in the comments. Please subscribe, like, share, and I'll check you on the next one. Peace.